Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Liesel, and we're almost ready to start our workshop, our PLC for the afternoon. I am sure there are more people going to join us. I am posting a register in the chat, but I have also got two of my colleagues, Tarana and Angelique, on the platform, and I'm also waiting for my assessment official, Abia, to join us if it's possible for her. So we hope it's going to be a fruitful hour spent together. I will be turning my camera off soon because I don't want anyone to be distracted by waving hands and all that, because I get quite animated when I speak. So yes, I'm going to turn my camera off and hopefully you'll enjoy the presentation. So if we look at, I'm just going to make sure I repost the chat. The register may be Terana or Angelique. If you see people are asking for it while I'm presenting, would you be able to just post it for me, please? Repost it. All right, so today we're going to be talking about learner support and intervention, which is quite a big thing. Because we are the language teachers, it comes to us most of the time. So just a little bit of a disclaimer that this is the purpose of this presentation is to support our language teachers in their day-to-day classes, because often you are the guys who fill in the SNAR forms and the ISPs, and you are the ones who are expected to come up with the strategies to help these learners. But please remember that we are not qualified to officially identify or classify challenges. So we are just here to pick up if there's challenges, make notes of it, and try and make the best of our time in class with the learners. All right, so I have used a couple of documents for this presentation, and when you want to refer to them, the White Paper 6, CS Policy, there's a link there that's quite a nice video on what the CS policy is. So if you're a new teacher and you're not exactly sure what it's about, do yourself a favor and go and look. I also looked at a whole lot of other resources to do this presentation. Then, what is the difference between intervention and support? So support refers to when we help an individual or a group who have special learning needs. Intervention is what takes place either to one learner or a group that needs more specialized or differentiated learning programs. So if you think about it, we actually do provide both in our classes. So support is simply when you are helping a child in class during the normal, if he's struggling to understand a question or anything like that, where intervention, you've identified there's a problem and you now do something specifically to address that challenge. All right, so the SPST comes in in a big way for this, because all support at your school is meant to be driven by the SPST. So it's the school-based support teams, and they have this key important role of providing the support for the teachers. The SPST schools are usually made up by grade leaders and people who are responsible for curriculum. And there's usually someone who drives it so that referrals can be done, decisions can be made, and there's resources at school level for these learners so that their challenges can be addressed. Now, the CS policy comes in because it is our official policy that guides the screening, identification, assessment, and support of all the learners with difficulties. So this is a policy framework where we standardize the procedures of how to identify, assess, and provide programs for all these learners. The CS protocol assumes 4 stages: screening, identification, assessment, and then support provisioning and monitoring. Let's look at all these different parts. So screening, Educators can use various methods to screen the learners. So this is obviously the very basic part where you as a teacher at the beginning of the year do your baselines, you read their portfolios, you see what challenges have been noted up to then, you see what other screenings you are able to do, and then you start making notes of all of these. If you then identify that learners are requiring different support than the day-to-day things you do for everybody, this learner would then be identified and referred to the SAT and the SBST. They will then be compiling a list, and parents will be notified about what type of support the learners will be needing. So stage 1 and 2 are done at classroom level. At this stage, educators begin their own support, intervention, and corrective teaching. And if there is then no improvement, then we move on to step 3 and 4. Assessment is step 3. That's where we will do summative formative assessments, identifying to identify the specific needs of the learners, diagnostic analysis, observations, anything like that that can be put together in a portfolio to provide evidence of where the learner needs support. At this stage, you might also call in ISS from the district to do a screening of the learner. Some of these screening tools you could use yourself. For instance, the EGRA to test the reading, whether they're on the reading benchmarks, the reading ages, those types of things you could do for yourself to give you an indication. And then there would be discussions with the SAT and the SBST on which support this learner will be getting. All right. So that's just the basic process that we follow. But now, for us as teachers in the class, very often we identify things or we pick up things in the class and we then don't really know where to go from there. So hopefully let's look at a little bit of these things more in depth. So the common learning disorders which affect the learner's abilities are read, write, do maths, use and understand language, socialize, and learn other skills that don't involve words. So these are the common things that we often pick up that there's this challenge with. Some learners have 1 or 2 of these, some have more, some just have 1 of them. If we look at reading, reading is often is based on understanding of speech. So the learning disorders with reading often are based on a child's trouble understanding a spoken word as a mix of distinct sounds. All right, so we pick this up. It could be a problem with short-term memory. We often identify that the reading pace is quite slow, or they don't understand what they're really reading, or they read perfectly, but when you ask them for questions, they cannot give you feedback. They can't make proper conclusions based on their reading. For instance, they might not be able to tell you what the plot of the story is. Where did it take place? What was the moral of the story? Spelling is often a problem. All right. So we do have a name for these types of problems, but we as teachers are not allowed to diagnose this unless we are actual professionals. But we obviously pick up the issues in class. Now, some learners have problems with writing, and that might involve vision, movement, and the ability to process information. So it might come out for you, it looks like the learner is really taking very long to write. The handwriting might be very bad. They have trouble recalling how to form letters and shapes. They can't draw a line. Handwriting is very hard to read, sometimes very small, sometimes really the letters are so badly formed you can't make it out. They could be good with putting their thoughts in words, but when you ask them to write it down, they can't. Their text, if they're writing a paragraph, an essay, it's often poorly organized and hard for you to make sense of it. And then, of course, the trouble with grammar, spelling, punctuation. So that could be a problem with writing. Then maths, I'm not going to spend too much time, but obviously if you're a math teacher, you will pick up some of these problems that if the skills of understanding how numbers work and relate, basic math rules, they don't understand that type of thing. It often then also, because, or if there is trouble with reading, coming to math word problems, that might also then come, and it might not necessarily only be a math problem at this stage, but it might be linked to a reading problem. Then sometimes we have learners who only struggle with speech and language. So that is a trouble using and understanding spoken or written words. So this might manifest in them having trouble with reading or writing, doing maths word problems, following directions. This is something you might notice because they can't process the speech, what they hear, into something that they can make sense of, or answering questions. They might have understood what they read, but they don't know how to answer the questions. Some speech and language challenges might also be stuttering, articulation of errors, various things. There's a long list. I've just highlighted some of the most common ones. Non-verbal skills. So this is when learners are having a problem. So they might excel at memorizing words, but have trouble with some skills that don't involve speaking. For instance, perceiving where objects are, understanding abstract concepts, reading people's emotions, facial expressions, other cues, body language. Fine motor skills might be lacking. Paying attention to planning, organization, staying on task. So those might be challenges with non-verbal skills. So then when a child, the symptoms of a learning disorder in a child can include not being able to master skills, understanding and following instructions, remembering what someone said, lacking coordination, losing homework, books, other items, trouble completing homework or assignments, and then acting out. Now, quite honestly, I bet if I have to ask you to put up hands, you would identify more than half of your class at least, if not all of them, have one or two of these symptoms already. That doesn't mean they have learning disorders. I think you must just be very careful. Sometimes a child just doesn't know how to sit still, or is undisciplined. He's not used to boundaries. So be careful to know what the difference is. There are other symptoms of learning disabilities. There's a whole list here, which I can share with you later again. It's very interesting, but I'm sure when you read the list, many of them will pop out and you think, I've seen this, I've seen this, I've seen this. All right. Now, when you have to create an individual support plan for the learner, that is our ISP, which we refer to, that literally means exactly what it said. It must be individual and it must be a plan to give support to that learner. So it's a plan designed for learners who need additional support or expanded opportunities. These plans are developed by the teachers in consultation with parents and by the SBST. This becomes the main organizer for schools, funding and post-provisioning, and the inclusive education system. So a lot of emphasis is going into this, individual support plans. These plans are drawn up using information and data collected by educators through observation and analysis. Again, why our analysis is so important when we do tasks. These plans may include some of the following: the learner's biographical details, a brief description of the learner's social context, identification of both internal, external barriers, description of educational support provided, assessment of the learner's present level of educational performance. So here you would do the baseline results, a reading age test, a spelling age test, that type of thing. Long-term outcomes for this learner. So where do you think long term, what is our plans for this child? Projected dates for the initiation. So your support plans must have time frames on it. We can't just indefinitely. We have to from time to time evaluate, reassess, see where we're going. Are we on the right path, and possibly align ourselves with things that work or don't work. The criteria and procedures for regular assessing. As I said again, we have to track the learner's progress. Otherwise, might not be doing the right thing. So now, in the past, when we've asked for the ISPs to be checked, we have comments like extra classes, easier work, homework, spelling words, reading. Now, those are not okay to have on an ISP. They are not giving me an idea of what you are doing. It doesn't help anyone to say, give extra classes. If a learner is struggling with reading and you say on there, I'm going to give him more reading, what do you really think that's going to make a difference? Because that learner has already got such a block about reading. He has challenges with reading. So simply giving him more reading is not going to solve the problem. So just please think before you put whatever you put on your ISPs. We have developed, two other colleagues of mine have worked with me, and we have provided you with exemplar ISPs with lists of possible things, which I'm going to show you now. So at the end, I will share the link for all of this. But for now, so here's an example of an individual support plan. So it has columns for areas in which support is needed. What is the target that we want to achieve? The strategy of intervention. Who's responsible? What's our time frame? When are we going to review? And then any progress comments. All right, now as you see on this page, that it doesn't have to only be academic challenges that go on the ISP. It might be behavioral, social problems. It might be an inappropriate placement. It's cut off your concentration, but this list goes on and on. So there's this ISP we literally filled in with possibilities for you to look at, for you to be guided. The next list that was prepared, it also goes over a number of pages. It lists the strengths and the needs. So what are the strengths? What are the needs of learners? He needs verbal instructions. He's lacking understanding. He's good with verbal expression, or he's not, or whatever it is. He has trouble listening in class, following routines. This is a child-headed household. He needs an adaptation of curricular content. So whatever it is, it's a couple of pages long list where you can just go and have a look at possible things, because us as teachers, I found we didn't always know how to word things. All right. The next thing is a whole SNAR possibilities list. So the SNAR form, when we come to that, I know the SNAR form, you start with the ISP, but often some of these learners already has a SNAR form that you will just keep building on by the time they get to our phase. And remember, so in this form, it has all the different barriers. So there's listening, there's reading, there's writing, there's all sorts of, all these skills are here. So we would then list the barrier, and it then goes on to list all these barriers, what it could be, what the implications would be, and what the strategies would be. And you will see you could then either take out the ones you don't need, or you could tick the ones you feel is appropriate. And as I said, it goes on and on and on. I'm just going to copy this link and put it in your oh, here it is, and put it in your chat. Then this is the link to the drive where you will find all the templates for all these things. Sorry, I'm just getting to that screen. I'm sharing my screen on a number of screens here in front of me. I've got two screens. Okay, there you go. So in the chat, I have now put the link for the share drive where all these templates are on. Okay, so possibly just now before you leave the meeting, copy it and bookmark it in your browser. Okay, so with this, really go and have a look. I think it will help you hugely as a teacher who's filling all these things in. Okay, so let's recap. The SBST is your internal support system. So the practical approach would be identify the child in need of support. So at this stage, we already have those lists. It's your learners at risk, and then you might encounter new children coming in who need support. Step 2, gather information, complete support forms, interview parents, begin intervention support and corrective teachings. Some schools have already had parent meetings, and I think that's amazing because the sooner you make parents aware that there's challenges and let's work together, because yes, it comes down to you to a large extent, but the parents should also be brought in on it. If no improvement, step 3, discuss the child at grade meetings. Collaborate with colleagues for further suggestions, assistance strategies. Your SBST, your SAT meetings, you should be, your grade meetings, you should be discussing these learners. It often helps to share the burden. Someone might have another suggestion of how to help a child. If no improvement, step 4, complete the SBST referral forms, which is the SNAR 1 and 2 forms, which that then means it gets sent to the district and it goes for further testing and evaluation. The SBST will meet with you and discuss further intervention. If no improvement, SBST refers to this that's a district-based support team, and that's SNAR number 3, and they then come and step in. All right, something that I wanted to just quickly mention. You know, sometimes you follow the whole process with this child, you finally get that everybody agrees the child needs to repeat, or he mustn't repeat, or whatever the outcome is, and parents make appeals at the district. All right, those often happen to be the borderline learners where you know this child is not going to cope in the next grade, but if the adjustments and condemnations have been applied, suddenly this child gets passed to the next grade. All right. Often when these are then looked at, it's a lack of support, evidence of support that cuts off the district's hands and saying that this child needs to go on, because the evidence that was presented shows that the teacher didn't supply the correct evidence of the support. The teacher might have provided the support, but if the evidence isn't relevant, that's all we can go on. What is the district looking for as evidence? So corrections, advice, correct steps to follow in the learner's book. Do it in their books. Write it in their books. Give the learner examples to follow. A copy from a child's work that did it right. A memo stuck in. Or you just writing down the steps there in the book. Easier or more simplified work given to learners. And then at the top, you will say intervention or support as an extra worksheet. Minutes of grade and SBST meetings where these learners were discussed. And then don't just say this learner was discussed. You have to give some idea of what was discussed and what was the outcome. Parent interviews, those minutes of the parent interviews are very important. Make sure the parents sign almost like a little register when they come to the meeting. So even though they might not want to sign the support form at the end, if they've signed that they have attended the meeting, you can at least prove that you have informed them. That's the important thing, that parents sometimes have short-term memory when it serves them. All right? Additional expanded opportunities. So these are the type of things we're looking at as support. So for instance, if this was a maths book, this was the sum, the learner did this, and the support would then be next to the sum in the book. with a couple of notes, the correct way of doing the sum, and it's right there for the learner and for everybody to see support has been given. Okay? Then, for instance, in a language, this learner had to underline the pronouns in green. So now the support would be, you have underlined the common nouns. Then we explain what's the difference between common nouns and pronouns and give them examples. So it's there in his book. That's what we are looking for. I saw a very nice example the other day of support provided to a learning struggle, a struggling learner. Often our learners struggle with writing. And then teachers ask me, can they do fill in paragraphs, and can that count as writing? No, it cannot. All right, but for this example, this learner had to write do creative writing. So this teacher went and she made a support worksheet, and she says, okay, our topic is the day the playground turned into a jungle. So she gives a starting sentence and then a prompt. She says, okay, now here you write the intro. Then I decided to, here you carry on, and there's your conclusion. And then the teacher went further and made a little exemplar passage of what it should look like, an example. And it says here, you're not allowed to copy this. This is an example, so the learner know what to strive for. I had another suggestion that I spoke to a teacher about today, where she really struggles for them to write 3 paragraphs. And I said to her, what about for the first paragraph, you do a paragraph with words left out. Then for the second paragraph, you give a writing frame like this. And then the last paragraph, you ask the learner to compose a sentence or 2 on his own. Now, was this child, can I test this child and give a mark for writing? Yes, I can, because we guided them, but they were still producing a paragraph or 2 on their own. And that's the difference. So if learners are struggling, we can't just give them a fill-in activity to do. That doesn't test the skill of writing. But if he has challenges with that, let's make it easier, but still test if he could write a sentence on his own. That's the main thing to remember. Here I have an example of a SNAR form that I saw, or actually parent meeting notes. So here the learner comes from grade 3. You can see home language, they had 54, FAL 26, maths 89. Now, if you look at this, you think, okay, this is a language problem, but also maybe it's just a FAL problem. Now, based on this report, I would say, okay, this learner has a language problem. Okay, that's where the challenges are. But then I look at the notes that accompanied this parent meeting saying, this child needs concessions. He's got dysgraphia. Now, that, if you saw earlier, is the challenge with understanding and with reading. But we are not allowed to diagnose that. Few characteristics of autism. We can't say that. Social anxiety disorder. We can't say that. All right? So we cannot write things like this in parent meeting notes. Be very careful. You do not have that degree to diagnose that. Okay? Then something I know some of my teachers have done, and I have done 2 examples for you. So this one, for you who can or can't see or understand, this is an Afrikaans full book. It's a learner who wrote Afrikaans words, English words, but there was lots of mistakes in it. And then there was questions and sentences written. And just looking at it, I thought, oh my goodness. So the red is the teacher, the green was me when I checked the book. And then what I did is I opened ChatGPT and I took a snapshot and I loaded it in. And so it says, looks like you have a mix of English and Afrikaans. Here's a breakdown of the content. So here it listed the words and the English words. Then it went on to give the sentences and give an English explanation of what the sentences is or is. So for instance, this one, my kwaai is groot, meaning my something is big. So it seems like there's a word missing here. This could obviously easily be put in as an explanation or intervention for parents to see, or rather for their ISP, and your evidence for support that this learner really doesn't know what's going on. I did the same with an English one. So now this is, I can't remember which grade. Last year, December, I was having fun with my best friend at home. So there's obviously a number of mistakes here. It picks up, so obviously the words I underlined, it picked that up, sandwich should be that, polony, well, it's actually not baloney, it's polony, but pillow fight, so it spells it correctly. Then it gives grammar and style adjustments, and then it gives a polished version, which you could then give as an intervention and a support. You flap stick it over, and so that the learner can see what it should look like. Okay, so these are just a couple of practical examples. Use the tools that you have at your disposal. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do this for every single child. But if it gets to the stage where you need evidence for a parent meeting, you can do this easily, and it's a very good example and support. All right. So whoever you are, whatever your strengths are, you are the best chance your learners have on their path to success. So we often ask, what can a teacher do? What have you got at your disposal? And don't give up. You are maybe just a teacher, but you are all that that child has. And our director loves the saying, success is intentional. If we plan to not make a difference, not find a solution, we mustn't expect miracles. But if we go all out and we intentionally set ourselves up for success, set the children up for success, we can absolutely, we will see movement. All right? Know your learners and their needs. Go and do research. Find anything and everything that could help you and them. Implement, try things, fail, have success, try again and again and again. Please don't give up. Again, you are possibly the best chance a learner has to get better. All right. One way of changing up the way you do things in your classes, which might make a difference, is obviously differentiated teaching or differentiated instruction. That is what you do during your classes that makes you able to include all your learners. So you can change these 4 things. Sorry, I was just having a sip of water. Curriculum content could be changed, so what they learn. Teaching methods, how they learn. The end product, how they show what they have learned. And the learning environment. These are all things that we can change or differentiate for our learners. I have found some very interesting videos, YouTube videos, that I will recommend that you go and check out. It's just something in practice for you to see how you differentiate. It doesn't have to mean huge things. It's things you can do. Grouping learners is another thing. There's often things you can do with a whole class, with small groups, paired group, interest groups is another nice way to do it. Cooperative expert groups, where a group does the same topic, but they all do different parts, and then they reteach it to each other. Cluster groups, which you cluster them into instructional groups based on characteristics. So maybe the ones good with maths, you put them in one cluster, and the ones good with speeches, you put them in another cluster. So these are also ways to differentiate your teaching. Keep in mind, multiple intelligences, we all learn differently. And Howard Gardner says we are all smart in different ways. And that's very true. We all learn differently. So you as a teacher must remember to incorporate as many different teaching styles um, to reach your children who learn differently. Okay, there's also different teaching strategies. There's another link here for a video. The guy explains it really nicely, how he keeps his teaching interesting and fun, and the learners never quite know what's going to come next. So he keeps them on these toes, on their toes. Then I also have YouTube videos of two previous sessions we did last year, one on the ISP alone and one on assessment from start to finish. So do yourself a favor and go catch up on those if you haven't seen them. Those we did last year. Okay, and then thank you for your time. I hope you learned something useful. I think I rushed like a speeding train, but I really am very conscious that you've had a long day already. I don't want to waste time. Um, you can contact me to have a discussion, but this was really just giving information. A big shout out to Sarah Martin and Tama Reinecker for their help and input. And yes, then that is us. I will put my face on again. There I am again. I hope you found this useful. I'm sorry if I spoke too fast, but as I said, I wanted to give you as much information as possible. This is not an exact science. I can't give you a step 1, 2, 3 for every child because every child is different. Your school situation is different. How we approach different things are very different too. So I can come in and give you guidance on a specific child and you and I talk about it. Or Tarana and Angelique is also here. We can talk about it. But essentially, you have to find something that works with your children. It has to be an online, sorry, I'm reading the chat here on the side. It must be a personal approach for each of your learners. And yes, there are some learners where you can do similar things with, but yeah, there's just no perfect science. It's trial and error. Okay, so yes, the one that says online PLC registration, that is the register for this one. I will also have take the register from the Teams meeting. Someone's asking, are the slides available on the Google Drive? I will be loading them on there as soon as this meeting is over, so that you can access the slides from there. I think that's a brilliant idea. I was actually wondering, how am I going to share? Because I think there are some people from other districts too. So yes, I will load the slides onto the Google Drive and hopefully that'll help you. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. And we have another one in a couple of weeks where we're going to be doing Excel. So watch this space. Thank you. Have a lovely afternoon.